Hello everyone, this is International Mastery at Sextopa. This time I'm going to show you the second part of a video showing my game in the Evans Gambit. If you missed the first part, I suggest you go to the related links showing you the first part in its entirety. And here's the second part with me going through the moves real quick until we get to the position where the two parts break apart. Okay, so it's the variation where I chose the move Queen b3, which is not the main continuation, but nonetheless a playable move. Okay, so we're going smoothly through the opening. Still a theoretical position. Okay, in this position, the rook g8, threatening to take on g2. After g3, we get to the position where I only consider the moves c6 and d5, but my opponent chose the also logical continuation, d6. And as it later turned out, it wasn't so easy for me to prove advantage here for white. After d6, I just castled. Okay, bishop g4. Attacking the knight. Right now, we can see the idea of d6, that it not only gets the bishop out, but also gets this very important square, e5, okay, under control, so the knight cannot jump there. I would like to get my knight on c3 instead, okay, to be later able to possibly go to d5 or b5, creating some threats. But my opponent is forcing me to put it on d2 now, and just develops his pieces, right? Queen d7. Now rook a b1, right? So it's not that black will just be better here immediately after these logical moves. I will always have some kind of an initiative here down these b and c files, creating pressure against black's queen side. Rook a b1, and looks like black is forced to play c6, okay, as the b7 pawn was hanging. If something like queen c6 instead, then just queen b3, and the queen is asking for trouble after a move like rook fc1 later on. It's not going to look good for black. And castle is basically what I want here. It leaves me just plenty of potential to develop the initiative after the king that has already declared which way it wants to be secured. So c6, and rook fe1, okay, trying to develop the other rook, leaving some potential for moves like rook e3 and lifting the rook onto the queen side. So rook fe1. d5 was another option, trying to just immediately create pressure in the center. But I wanted to finish my development first, so rook fe1. And now he played h5, which I think is too fast, and he should be taking care of his king first. I think king f8 was a much better option. And strangely, king f8 is just by far the safest square here for the black king, following the rule that whenever there is a heavy piece on the same file, the king should just go somewhere else from the file. And yeah, here f8 just looks like the right square. Black's got many pieces around the king. The position's not exactly open, and it's not very easy to get to it. But he played h5 instead. And after rook b3, h4, okay? So I think black just misevaluated the position and tried to create some pressure against my king, but my king is just way too safe here behind the f2, g3, and h2 pawns, and it proved very bad for him later on. Okay, so rook b3, logically lifting the rook up, creating some potential doubling up either this way, okay, on the b file, or even in some variations, getting the B rook onto E3, okay, and maybe opening the E file later on. H4 and okay, D5. So well, this move is essential to create more pressure here against the king. I'm trying to open the files. The king hasn't castled yet, so I'm trying just to take advantage of that. He continues his plan, h takes g3. Now I cannot really ignore that, and I played f takes g3 because I was afraid that after h takes g3, there could be some potential way of him to take advantage of the h file, but of course there is not really a way. It's just going to take him too much time to create any pressure against my king. And I should have taken with the h pawn simply because when I take with the f pawn, this diagonal may prove a little vulnerable. And I did have some issues with this diagonal and this open space I created here around my king. So h takes g3, just a much safer option, essentially killing any potential counterplay for him. And now a move that I think essentially gives up any chances for black to fight for equalizing, I guess, in this case, or seizing an advantage, is the move c5. It was the last call for him to play king f8, okay, to secure his king. And after c5, it turns out it's just pretty much over after e5. Okay, so e5, this time, if king f8, I do have a real move, e6, okay, and this will just turn out to be a crushing advantage. For instance, after queen c8 takes on f7, and if something like rook g7, a move like queen c3, controlling this essential diagonal, the king is extremely weak. I equalize the amount of pawns, and it doesn't seem like black has a way of completing his development here on the queen side. Yeah, this position is pretty much over. So he chose to castle queenside, but after knight d4, okay, the attack will be overwhelming. In this position, I wasn't able to find any viable options here for black anymore, and I think it's basically lost. He chose d takes e5, and I don't really think there's anything better to do. For instance, after rook de8, rook eb1 will essentially end the game. There are just basically too many threats. I always have the move e6 in some convenient variation. In some variations, I can take on d6. I have moves like knight c6, and if b takes c6, then queen a6, the mating attack, or knight b5 in some cases. There's just too much pressure against the queen side. I can also play knight e4 whenever I want. And after d takes e5, knight c6 just leaves an extremely uncomfortable position for him. Now, I remember in this position, he thought for like 30 minutes, and he played bishop e6, trying to create some complications. But again, there was not really anything better to do here. If b takes c6, then queen a6 just ends the game, basically. King c7, queen a7. Okay, the king starts traveling onto the center. And after queen a5, there is no defense against checkmate on c3. So black in this variation really gets punished for getting the king to the wrong side. Okay, knight c6. So that's why bishop e6, hoping for some kinds of complications. But I just take on a7. Now king c7. If king b8, I have knight c6. And let's say king c7. Now there follows a really attractive checkmate in a few moves. I'll let you guys guess. So in this position, rook b7 check doesn't leave too much choice to black. King takes b7 is the only move. Check on b5. Now king c7. If king a8, then obviously queen a6 ends the game with a swift checkmate. And now king c7, queen a5 check, king d6, knight c4 check, only move, and now this amazing move, queen a4, which basically completely compromises the position of the black king and leads to a swift checkmate. For example, after queen takes c6, rook d1, check, no other move than king e4, knight d6 check, king e3, queen a3, king e2, and queen d3 is a checkmate. Okay, so black king nicely chased throughout the center. Black cannot really go for this variation. Now, if we go back, after knight a7, black didn't choose the move king b8 we just looked at, but played king c7 instead. Okay, d takes e6, and the original idea of why black played bishop e6, queen takes d2. Now, rook eb1, strengthening the pressure here against the black king on the queen side. b7 pawns hanging. So b6. Knight comes back to bother the black king. King b7. In this position, I played e takes f7, but there's a move that finishes the game right away. And it's queen e4, which I didn't see. I basically didn't realize that after queen d5, I have the nice finish after knight d6. The idea being that after rook takes d6, I can simply play rook b6. If king goes to the a file, then just queen a4 is a checkmate. So let's say king c7. I can play rook b7. Okay, just chase the king around. And after king c6, there's a checkmate on a4. Okay, so a really cool variation. I wish I had ended up the game this way, but I didn't quite see the move knight d6 in that position, which was the key move. E takes f7, though, still leaves me a really comfortable edge, and it's still a huge winning advantage, basically. After rook g6, now I can play rook a3, which is the most accurate move, and again, this threat just basically destroys black's position right away. I played rook f3. I was in quite a time trouble by this time, and rook f3 just looked like a natural move. I didn't really expect the position to just be able to be concluded with an immediate checkmate, so I was just trying to, use all of my threats on the king side also. Bishop f8, and now it's over after queen a4. I'm threatening to come here to a7, so black needs to play rook a8 to defend the square. Now I just play queen e4. Now there's no way to put anything on d5, as the rook just barely deviated away from the d file to a8. Only move is king b8. Check. King b7. All right, queen c7, king a6, and rook a3. Black resign. Okay, it's not a checkmate, but it's basically a devastating material advantage. After queen a5, I just take it. Okay, so it's over. So this was the game number 1 that I was going to show in the Evans Gambit. Thank you very much for your attention. So in this game, we saw me playing the move queen b3, which I knew wasn't the best move in the position. But at the same time, I was aware that the move gives me a lot of options, and it's definitely a more complicated variation than the main choice, d4. And I wasn't disappointed throughout the game. I got exactly what I wanted, and my opponent slipped giving me a smooth win in this really important game of the tournament.